So let's have a lesson on this piece by Kellner. You can watch the video for free and just pick up tips on Baroque music and approaching new pieces. If you have the piece in another book, just follow along, but if you want, it's part of my Volume 2 Easy Classical Guitar, and there's a link for that under the video. So unlike the other pieces that we've gone over so far in the book, this piece doesn't really have a melody in the same way. This is the late Baroque era and kind of a galant style. And so it's very flowing, and there's certainly motivic elements to it and sections that sound melodic, but it kind of is more of just a texture that comes together all in the context of the pulse. So instead of playing it just melody alone, it's very nice, but it doesn't quite flow in the same way. So on this particular piece, you'll probably end up just really dropping the tempo when you first start working on it, just to make sure that you get all the shapes and that you're playing very flowing and very legato. You can still phrase the music, so you can come easier way in and easier way out of the phrases, and still aim for that kind of nice, beautiful phrasing and legato playing that you would in the more melodic works. But certainly in this piece, it'll all be very strongly connected to those 3 beats per bar. So when you're familiarizing yourself with this piece, you kind of want a little bit of familiarity with both the melodic elements, but also the chords, because some of the chord shapes that you'll be playing are very familiar. Like the first bar is really just a D chord, right? That's all just that D shape there. And then you have an A here, a little bit more D again, and more A and D, A. And that E major going to A, returning to D again. So lots of those shapes. So you just want to kind of become familiar with the piece so you can anticipate what's coming next. Let's just do a basic walkthrough of the piece. I didn't add any ornamentation to this one. Feel free to, but it's pretty active for my easy guitar collection. It's probably one of the more difficult pieces in the book, but still just grade 3. There's no barre or anything like that, no tough trills. Just it's more just about being familiar with the shapes and knowing what finger needs to be where before it happens, so that you, as you're playing, you don't get caught off guard and have to lunge for a note, but instead, when you're playing, that you know that you have to keep your hand aligned so that the next note that comes up is always available and is right under your fingertips. So let's do a walkthrough of the piece. You can really feel a lot of just the first beat in this. 1, 2, 3. Making sure that the sustain of the first bass note of each bar really carries you through and creates a cushion of sound that carries you through the bar. Relax at the end of that phrase so that you
get a nice sense of resolution from that G sharp to A. Besides that, the fingering, it's going to be the thumb for all the bass notes. So just keep the thumb on all the down stems. And then you're just going to be alternating fingers. You can decide, like sometimes it's going to be a chord. So at the beginning, I go M, I, A, because that's just the kind of most ergonomic way to play those strings there. But then you just do your best to alternate. There's some slurs in this piece, so that helps with the fingering. But nevertheless, just try to alternate as much as possible. Places like bar 5, if you have a repeated note, sometimes I'll just do P, A, I, just kind of keeping those two fingers really active. Whatever is most simple, but making sure that you alternate. So let's do that first half again, and then we'll go into the second half. There's so many times when the bass note comes in that you're not that active actually, because there's always this intervening bass note. It's back and forth between the voices so much that it's really just like it's not that busy in terms of alternating fingers. So bar 9, the second half. That jump of the first finger, like you could do a bar A there, but then it's actually a little bit cleaner if you actually just jump that finger over. I use my thumb for that, all the down stems there, G, F sharp, E. I try to use my fingers on all those notes, even the fourth string notes, just to kind of keep the bass voice and the upper voice separate in my right hand. You could play some of those lower fourth string notes with your fingers. You know, throwing the I finger onto those fourth string notes. But I kind of like the idea of just keeping the separation of the voices and the technique. So just keeping things simple by only using my fingers for the top voice and only using my thumb for the lower voice. That grace note there, it's written as a 16th note, so you're going to play it on the beat. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 3, and so you play that E right on the beat and turning those two notes into 16th notes. We talked about this in the last video, that when you play those, we wouldn't write them out as two 16th notes because it's a grace note, because it's an ornament. It changes your perception of the music. If we wrote it out, you would think of both of them as being equally important and primary notes, but that's not the case. It's the D that's the primary note, and that E is just a grace note. It's an ornament. So you could leave it out, for example, and the primary notes of the piece would be there. Now in the final bar, that grace note is not in the original. I added that because it's a pretty minimal, spacious last bar. It's just a little bit too much space. Actually, it's quite nice and simple. If you like it, you don't have to play my C sharp ornament. But I add that in, and so I'm playing those as quarter notes. Which is a very appropriate style of ornamentation in the period. So that kind of fills out that last bar. So it's up to you if you want to include that, but I think it really helps with the spaciousness in that bar there. So let's just run that second half one more time. The piece is kind of difficult for an easy book, but at the same time, it's not actually that busy. It's very rare that he's having both voices being played at the same time. It's kind of either the lower voice being played or the upper voice. So it's kind of lower, upper, then lower, then upper, then lower. It's like a game of tag almost. So you very rarely have like two voices playing notes on the same beats. You do have to sustain the notes though. So your fingers will have to stay down a lot, but that's actually a very secure way of playing. So if you're finding the piece a little difficult, just go very slow. Focus on, you might want to play it with a metronome quite a bit to make sure that your rhythm is very solid, but very slowly and sustaining the notes very carefully, keeping your fingers on those notes as long as possible. So you get lots of legato connection. And just until it feels very secure, and then you can raise the tempo later. It's a pretty exciting piece though. It sounds very active, so it was a good find for, it's difficult to find music for 13 chorus lute that works on the guitar, and this one works quite nicely.